One of the most underappreciated aspects of Smash Ultimate to me has gotta be the stage selection. There are so many stages available to play, with each one having their own interesting concepts and inspirations. And I feel that one of the big reasons as to why many fans don't take a minute to just appreciate the sheer magnitude of what's available here is mainly because of the standard competitive practice of playing on stages with little to no gimmicks. On occasion for me, I think it's very refreshing to play this way, especially if you're trying to improve at the finer aspects of the gameplay, but man, a lot of the time I just feel like going on some wacky stages hoping to have a good time. As the title indicates, today we're going to be examining every series in Smash Ultimate that has a playable character. Yes, every single one, even including the ones that I left out of the fighters video, to try and find out what the best choice would be if they were to get one more stage. These are going to be chosen by how well they represent their series and maybe aspects of that franchise that aren't highlighted as much in Ultimate as I believe that they should be, and of course based on how unique and fun I think the stage would be to play on. Now these are just some ideas that I personally have, and they may be different from your own dream stages, which is why I encourage you to list some of your ideas in the comment section down below. And with that being said, let's get into it. What if every series in Smash Ultimate got one more stage? Today's video is sponsored by Skillshare. You can learn more about how to explore your creativity later in the video. Kicking off the video today in series order is Super Mario. Being the series with the most stages, there are obviously many games and types currently represented, yet there are still many great options. One of the most iconic series locations is Bob-on Battlefield, and it could definitely be a fun stage, but Mario 64 already has 3, so it doesn't really need another one to me. So how about a Dr. Mario stage, since he doesn't have one yet? Yeah, that could work, but to me there are still many more interesting and deserving ideas. With my pick today, we're not only going to be representing a character who doesn't have a stage yet, and a game that doesn't have a stage yet either, but it's also going to be incredibly unique from the others in the game already. This is World Bowser from Super Mario 3D World. Now Bowser doesn't really have a suiting home stage right now, and this bright and beautiful world would be a great place to wage battle. This could be a stationary stage where it just uses the background and terrain of the overworld, but if they really wanted, it could change like the Three Houses stage, warping you to various locations within the world. There would definitely be some great options if that was the case, with the best example in my opinion being Grumblump Inferno, because the lava style fits really well with what one would conventionally think of a Bowser level to look like. Bowser's Castle is definitely one of the most highly requested Mario stages, but I feel that by including World Bowser from 3D World, you not only represent more of the franchise, but you could also still implement some of those aspects inside. To me, it's the best of both worlds here, and that's why it's my pick for the Mario series. Moving on to the Donkey Kong franchise, and for the next stage, I'd like a simpler one to be based off of Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. This is a great 2D platformer if you haven't played it yet, so good in fact that they put it out on the Switch as a port from the Wii U, something pretty rare to see nowadays, I have to admit. Kidding aside though, a level that I think would be really cool to represent this game is Sawmill Thrill. There are a variety of areas that can be chosen here, but I think the main segment to feature should be the one with the minecart, as it's a very iconic part of the Donkey Kong Country games. And there would obviously be some saw blades everywhere that could do some damage to you if you come into contact with them. It would create a very fun dynamic of riding in the minecart to get to a different part of the stage in games where a large number of players are present, and also being able to throw some unsuspecting ones onto the blades. I'd honestly be fine with any representation from Tropical Freeze though, because I just believe that it's a very important part of the Donkey Kong franchise to represent in Smash that's not yet, but my personal pick would be Sawmill Thrill. Moving on to The Legend of Zelda, a franchise that many would like to see more characters implemented for, but if we're talking about stages, what would be my pick here? And the stage that I really want to see for Zelda the most is one based on A Link Between Worlds. This was a beloved game by many fans on the 3DS, and it's also the basis for the design of Zelda in Smash Ultimate, so I feel it would make a lot of sense to include one based off of this game. In terms of a specific area, there are many different options here that I think would work well, but we could go with this. It could be based on Lorule Castle, which on its own would be an interesting location with the look and the flaming hazards that be placed throughout, but it could also be one of those stages that transitions between various dungeons and areas to showcase more of the interesting level design present throughout the game. Moving on to the Metroid series, and for Metroid here, I wanted to pick something a little bit different from what we've got so far, so I decided on the Sanctuary Fortress from Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. Most of the Metroid stages so far either have a lava or lab-based component, whereas this one mainly takes place in a high-tech stronghold that has a variety of interesting places to wage battle within. If the main area would be prominently used, it would still provide a unique aesthetic, but what would be really fun is if a dynamic was created where you could travel throughout the various levels of the fortress, where they'd all have some unique aspect to mimic the actual gameplay. Moving on to Yoshi, and this should come as a surprise to absolutely nobody that I'm picking a stage based on Yoshi's Crafted World. This game is relatively new on the Switch and offers a really cute and unique cardboard aesthetic. I really wish that the Woolly World stage didn't get cut, but if that had to happen, then could we at least get a stage based off of this game? Come on, they even put an alternate costume based on this title for Yoshi, so why not a stage? The main location of the stage isn't that big of a deal to me. They could use the main one and I still think it would work fine, or they could do the transitional style. The main point here is to get the aesthetic from this Yoshi game in as a stage, and some cardboard hazards could potentially be implemented and would be a lot of fun to play on. And moving on to the Kirby series now, going along with that last point, now that the Woolly World stage is gone, maybe that could now open up an opportunity for some uniqueness with a stage based on the aesthetic of Kirby's epic yarn. This would definitely be my choice for the Kirby series, and it's mainly because, while yes, there are some locations from newer games like Star Allies and Triple Deluxe that could be pulled from, none would still have that same level of an overall style change as one based on epic yarn, with the main area of the stage probably being Patchland, which I think would work really well. And here's a fun bit of trivia for you if you didn't know. Reports have stated that there actually was planned to be a stage based off of epic yarn in the development for Smash 4, but it was scrapped, so I'd love to see it brought back and included. Also, another reason that I'd really like to see it is that we might actually get some music from this game for once. Lots of good tracks to pull from here. Moving on to Star Fox, and man, it really looks like we need another stage based on a ship, right? Yeah, it's been a pretty rough go for stages from this series in terms of uniqueness, so let's draw from a place in the series that takes place on the ground. I decided to go with Dragon Rock from Star Fox Adventures, which is mainly in a desert with a fortress inside that could potentially be used as well. I know this may be a bit more of a controversial pick due to how the majority of the Star Fox fanbase seems to perceive Adventures, but considering that the game has no representation stage-wise and one of its main characters in Crystal was brought into a more prominent role in Ultimate as an assist trophy, I think it makes sense to draw more attention to it, and as a desert stage, it would be a pretty unique one for Star Fox standards. Moving on to the Pokemon franchise, and just like Mario, in my opinion, there are a ton of great options here, but I'm gonna settle on one, with this being the Wild Area. This is probably the most famous location from the new Pokemon games, Sword and Shield. This stage makes a lot of sense to me because there usually have been stages representing the newer generations of Pokemon, such as the Kalos ones from Smash 4, for example. This didn't happen with Ultimate for Incineroar, but if we do get a Gen 8 rep in Smash, I'd love for the most iconic area from Galar to receive a stage. This would definitely be one that changes the background and the terrain as you travel through it because of the wide array of locations present within the wild area. Various weather types, large stretches of land and water, a perfect amount of different variety and scenery for a Pokemon stage. And next up, we're moving on to Earthbound. This series is a pretty interesting case because the lack of particular representation in the series isn't really there in Ultimate. All three games have some sort of implementation with their iconic areas, and they're all unique from one another. This is going to allow me to be a bit more unique here and go with Osoe Castle from Mother 3. Now I get it, in terms of likelihood to actually get in as a stage, this one is slim to none, but for those of you who've played through Mother 3, you'll likely recognize this as one of the creepiest and most challenging areas in the entire game. The music in the overworld is fantastic, and then when you finally get to fight Mr. Passion, you get classical music from the likes of Beethoven and Mozart, which is really interesting. The vibe of the stage, purely because of the look and the music alone, will automatically make it unique, but the various enemies that can be stage hazards put it over the top for me. There are these ghosts that like to ride rocking horses, the various types of skeletons, and much more, including the main bosses I mentioned earlier. Loads of possibilities here. Moving on to F-Zero, and in terms of theming changes, I don't want to stray too far away from the racing vibe of the other stages since that's the whole point of the game, so I'll just pick another pretty popular track from the series. I'm choosing Phantom Road here not only because it looks really cool, but also because it provides a nice contrast to the Rainbow Road stage for the Mario series. So maybe it could have some other attributes that mimic the current stage with some changes to further emphasize that whole similar yet different idea. Now when it comes to the implementation of a new Ice Climber stage, it gets pretty difficult because there's very little to no source material available here. My only real idea for this one is for a more vertically based ice climbing stage to more closely mimic how you scale from level to level in the actual Ice Climber games, rather than just fighting around a glacier like the current one provides. Moving on to Fire Emblem, and considering that Fire Emblem Fates is a pretty well-known entry in the series with a playable representative that doesn't have a stage, I think it would be a pretty good idea to derive one from this game. There are many conflicting views on the three Fates titles, but I think a stage that could come from the game's material could still be very interesting whether you love the games or not. Like most of the other Fire Emblem stages, it's likely not going to be a specific location, as it could use many aspects of different battlefields present throughout the game. If it was going to be a standalone area though, I think it would have to be the Plains of Hoshido, since it's home to the most important and critical moment of the game, when Corrin has to choose a side. This influences the rest of your journey, and both sides have compelling arguments here. It's the home of a battle following this decision, and I think it'll lend well to being a great Smash Bros. Stage. Moving on to Game & Watch, and like the Ice Climber situation, it's pretty tough to devise a new stage for it, considering that there's only only one that already covers most of the bases. Flat Zone X is sort of a combination of Flat Zone 1 and 2, so I don't think bringing one of those back is going to be the ultimate solution either. I'm suggesting a new stage in a similar vein to this, potentially using some of the other more popular games from the Game & Watch that aren't already represented. Some examples that come to mind are the Greenhouse, Pinball, Manhole, and Parachute. Some would be pretty wacky and unique to say the least. I wouldn't bank on something like this happening realistically though. Moving on to Kid Icarus, and for a new stage from this franchise, I chose Orem Island from Uprising. This is a really cool looking area from chapter 15 of the game and has some subcomponents that could be seamlessly woven into the stage to create a more dynamic level layout, such as the tower being a prominent example, or the stage could remain as a mostly flatter surface without many gimmicks with some nice Easter eggs in the background. All in all, I think it would represent the game well, and it's something unique for what Kid Icarus currently has in terms of stage representation. Let's move on to Wario. Now, looking at the only two Wario stages in Ultimate, they're both based on WarioWare and Game & Wario respectively, so I think it would be nice to have a stage based on the Wario Land games as a nice change of pace. My main choice for this is Crescent Moon Village from Wario Land 4. This stage has a cool nighttime vibe with ghosts flying about, which could serve as interesting hazards for the stage. It could be a side scroller as well to mimic the actual nature of the in-game level, but it could work just as well, if not better, in the standalone environment. It could be very good for the series to get something like this added. Let's move on to Metal Gear. Being technically the first third-party franchise in Smash, Metal Gear obviously needed a stage, and Shadow Moses Island is a very unique addition. So what will we add for a second one? Well, I think it would be better to represent a different game in the series, so not the first one, and I'm going to go with Metal Gear Solid 5 here. I think a stage based on the mother base would be pretty cool. There are various components of the base that could be used for platforming and stage hazards, working well as a Smash Bros. Stage. Let's move on to a big one now. This is Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic is definitely a disappointing series in terms of their representation in Smash, and this also includes the stage selection. There's only two, and they both look very similar to one another, so let's change that. My first main choice here would be Casino Night Zone from Sonic the Hedgehog 2. This would provide a significantly different look as compared to the other two Sonic stages, and a change of pace would be great for this franchise. There are so many different options for how the stage would be laid out for battle as well, considering that there are many places for platforming in the regular version. Now, in terms of a new Pikmin stage, well, the current two that they have are pretty interesting, and both represent Pikmin 1 and 3 respectively. I think it only makes sense to pick something from Pikmin 2 as a new location to wage battle on, and my first choice here would be the Perplexing Pool. This is an interesting area from the game, and it mainly contains these smaller areas of land surrounded by a lot of water, and this dynamic could definitely be carried over well with Smash. There are caves, various hills, and rock formations scattered about as well, which could assist in the ambiance and the terrain of the stage respectively. All in all, I think it would be a really fun idea to have. Moving on to, I don't really know if we could call this a franchise to be honest with you, but it's just Rob, okay? Now, Rob's kind of a depressing case considering that he's the only fighter, and yes, you heard me right, the only fighter in Smash Ultimate whose series, if you want to call it that, doesn't have a single stage. There's a major lack of source material here, but hey, if Game & Watch could get one, why not our favorite robotic operating buddy, right? Gyromite is one of the only two games available to play on Rob that actually takes advantage of its unique features, and I think a stage based on it would be pretty cool in Smash. The main premise of this game is to travel throughout a lab defusing dynamite, and yeah, this would be a wild concept for a stage. Having to simultaneously focus on fighting your opponents while also avoiding the dynamite, which could blow up on you at any time, things could get really crazy, and Rob definitely deserves a stage. I feel this idea would meet, if not surpass, expectations that fans have. Next up is a very popular franchise at the moment, with this being Animal Crossing. With stages already being based on Wild World, City Folk, and New Leaf, I think it's only natural to pass the torch on to New Horizons. My first choice for a New Horizons stage would be pretty unique, but I'd go with the Mystery Islands found on the Island Tour. One of the big new features from New Horizons was the ability to travel to other islands through the Dodo Airlines, and I believe a stage where the location you're fighting on shifts throughout would be suitable here. You'll see villagers that live there in the background, and on each different island there will be different types of terrain to play on, and of course different trees and types of fruit. The most important thing. I think this would be a nice change of pace for Animal Crossing stages while not drifting too far away from the main theme of the game. In terms of a new stage for the Mega Man series, I really like the idea of including the Central Highway from Mega Man X. This one gets attacked in the beginning of the game, and those enemies can be really interesting hazards to spread throughout. There are many opportunities for a cool design and concept with this one, and the music tracks that go along with it would obviously be fantastic. And next up, we're moving on to a pretty weird franchise for the subject overall, being Wii Fit. And I say this because there's one stage, and on the surface it seems like the only really fitting stage for this franchise. But if we are going to have a new one, I think it would have to be much less general, meaning one based off of the games within Wii Fit, with my choice today being the Ultimate Obstacle Course. This one has a variety of areas and could easily be one of those horizontally moving stages as you go along the course, but I personally prefer a more stationary option that takes place in the sky. It would be pretty different from the current stage and also have some unique hazards, with the rotating platforms being a big example of this. Now for the Punch-Out franchise, there's really no more fitting one than the boxing ring stage currently in the game. game. Including anything else might not represent the series quite as well, but I think a good middle ground could be established with this idea. What about the idea of using a retro-themed boxing ring, based on the look of the one from the original Punch-Out? It wouldn't just be an identical stage with some slight aesthetic changes though, as in order to actually reference this being an old boxing ring, several components would look dated and torn up, potentially affecting the platforms on the stage, and it may create some hazards as well. Fairly limited options here, but I think this would probably be better than just using the training room or something. Moving on to Mii, where the stage selection is kinda interesting because they're all based on various games where the Miis appear, creating a more diverse array than most other franchises. And I think it's only natural to get a stage based on the relatively new Miitopia game, which is an RPG title featuring these characters for those who are unfamiliar. I think Nimbus would be an interesting idea to place a stage on because it changes things up from the conventional looking Mii stages and also isn't too similar to the fine Mii stage. This one takes place in the clouds and contains many robotic enemies which could be included as hazards. Next up is Pac-Man, and this one is incredibly easy for me. We're not creating a new stage here and instead are just bringing back the Pac-Maze from Smash 3DS. Whether you enjoy stages of this layout type or not, I think everyone can admit that this is how the majority of people remember Pac-Man in retrospect, not in the look of Pac-Land. This is the most iconic Pac-Man appearance by far, and it absolutely should have been represented in Smash Ultimate. Moving on to the Xenoblade franchise, and my first choice is Mira from Xenoblade Chronicles X. This one is here not because Xenoblade 2 wouldn't have a good stage selection, as I definitely believe that it would, but it's mainly here because of the lack of representation of Xenoblade Chronicles X in Smash right now, and this one could be a very creative stage. Now, since this world in Xenoblade Chronicles X is so vast, it could either transition you through various continents, or it could just take place on one, likely Primoria or New Los Angeles. It could potentially be giant monsters that pop in as stage bosses, or the problem could just be the terrain. I feel it'd be so great to get some Xenoblade X music in the game as well, since I feel Sawano and the team did a great job with many of the tracks here with the orchestral vibes, and there isn't a single one currently in the game. Next up, we have Duck Hunt, and this one is really odd because there's only one game, and one of the two modes, the much more iconic mode I'll add, is already represented as a stage. This leaves us with only one real option to represent, and this is the Clay Pigeon mode. Duck Hunt uses this as a move, but I think in a scenario where this is a stage, they'd have to fly around on the screen as hazards. Other than that, I think it would be pretty similar to the current Duck Hunt stage. Not much of a creative pick here, but we're pretty bereft of options to be completely honest with you. Let's move on to Street Fighter, and this is a very popular franchise with more than one fighter, and sometime in the distant future, I'd love to see a new stage, with my first pick being the Air Force Base from Street Fighter 2. This is Guile's stage, and not only is the music really good, but I could also see this one being seamlessly integrated into Smash Brothers. Now moving on to a franchise that likely would not be getting a new stage anytime soon due to the poor showcase of new content for it overall, but nevertheless, we can dream. And my choice for a stage to represent Final Fantasy would definitely be one of the airships. There's so many of these throughout the series with many things to do in them, and because of that, I think a combination of some of them would work, but it can mainly just be based on the High Wind, which is the prominent one in Final Fantasy VII, the game where Cloud comes from. Also, the only game where we have a character representative thus far, so it would definitely be much more fitting. Moving on to Bayonetta, where my first choice for a stage here is Vigrid. This is the main location of the first Bayonetta, and yes, I would likely have picked something from Bayonetta 3 had we known much more about it, but unfortunately that's not the case. However, from what we have to work with, this place could definitely have some interesting platform integration techniques if the intricate buildings were incorporated. All in all, a recognizable location from the series and one that greatly contrasts with Bayo's current field of battle. Now moving on to a very interesting one to me, with this being Splatoon. There are a variety of locations that could work in my opinion, not even necessarily Inkopolis Plaza, as it seems kind of basic, but in terms of other maps, we could have ones like Walleye Warehouse, Black Valley Skate Park, and much more. They're probably more iconic than the idea that I'm going to suggest for this video. I'm going with something a little bit different here, this being the Deep Sea Metro from the Splatoon 2 Octo expansion. This DLC really expanded a lot on what a single player campaign of Splatoon could really be like, and the vibe and atmosphere of the various levels in here is pretty different from Moray Towers. This would be a great contrast and a great tie-in to modern Splatoon content. Moving on to Castlevania, where the obvious and probably best pick possible for a stage was Dracula's Castle. It's very fitting, giving the series a creepier vibe, but for a new stage, I'm gonna go with the Clock Tower from Symphony of the Night. Kinda funny how we already have a Clock Tower stage with Bayonetta, but this one would be quite a bit different to say the least. This is mainly due to more terrain to walk on of varying levels, and gears would obviously play a role somewhere considering their importance to the actual location in the game. Moving on to Persona, and for a new Persona stage, like in my video about characters, I'm leaning more away from Persona 5 here since it seems to have most, if not all, of the representation, so I'm going with Dojima Residence from Persona 4. This is the main hub area of the game, it would be very recognizable and have a good contrast with Mementos. Hazards obviously wouldn't be too crazy here, but hey, not every stage really needs to be that way, right? Moving on to Dragon Quest, where my pick for a stage is Dragon Lord's Castle. With the Ultra stage being based on Dragon Quest VI, I thought I could bring it back a little bit more to the first Dragon Quest. and give it a bit more of an eerie vibe. There are various monsters present here which could act as stage hazards, such as the dragons for example. Yes, I'm sure nobody saw those coming, and it could work very well as a Smash stage. Next up we have Banjo-Kazooie, and my first choice for a new stage for this series would be Grunty Industries. It's a factory that's filled with pollution, so there would already be some hazards that could be seamlessly implemented here, and like a lot of the ones that I've selected, it would be a nice contrast to the more bright and open Spiral Mountain. Moving on to Fatal Fury, and my pick for a new stage would be Terry's main stage from Fatal Fury 2. This one has Mount Rushmore in the background, and I don't know if that's a little too close to real life for Smash, but it could definitely be changed a little bit. We're mainly talking about the idea of it here, and I'd really like for Terry to be able to fight on a pretty memorable home stage from his game if he was to get another one. Probably not too overboard with the gimmicks here either, likely just borrowing some from the current King of Fighters stage, but having this setting with some slight changes would be really cool. And last but not least, the final franchise in this video so far is ARMS. We're getting more DLC fighters later down the line that are likely going to add more franchises, but as of right now, ARMS is the final series. It's pretty odd to me that when Min Min was picked as a fighter, her stage wasn't also taken with her, as we got the Spring Stadium instead. I think this stage is much more memorable than Ramen Bowl, but it would still be fitting to have it in anyways. This one has a much lower center compared to the outskirts, so hazards and bombs could roll down, potentially causing some pain for those fighting in the middle. It makes a ton of sense to include this one to me. I get why it was cast aside, but if there was going to be a second one, I really don't think they should pass on it again. And something else I don't think should be passed on is this opportunity to get 2 free months of Skillshare Premium. I know you like that transition. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes in design, business, technology, and much more, including subjects like game development or even making your own YouTube channel. A class that I've talked about before that I enjoyed was mastering C# in 6 hours because programming has been pretty interesting to me. But it's definitely not just that. There's courses on music, arts, writing, pretty much anything that you could think of. Skillshare should have it there for you. A premium membership gives you unlimited access to high quality classes on must-know topics so you could improve your skills, unlock new opportunities, and do the work you love. And as I mentioned before, Skillshare is much more affordable than most other learning platforms out there with an annual subscription fee of less than $10 a month. But the best part is if you sign up right now with the link in the description, you can get your first 2 months absolutely free. There's no risk because it's a free trial, and I think you'll be really happy with it. You'll support me a lot by doing so as well. You gotta use the link down below to get that 2-month free trial though. I really encourage you to check them out. Thanks. Now, if you want to find out if every series in Smash Ultimate got one more fighter, you can check out that video using the link on screen right now. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on all notifications to ensure that you don't miss new content like this coming your way very soon. I appreciate every single one of you who watches my videos, and I'll see you next time.